My name is Carter, and for most of my life, I had been the kind of man people looked through. Not because I was ugly, not because I was rude, because I was ordinary. At 23, I was an unpaid intern at Blake Industries, which sounded a lot better than it felt. I fetched coffee, carried files, fixed printers, and smiled at people who didn't know my name 5 minutes after I introduced myself. That was my life. Then, one rainy Thursday, everything changed. I had just finished a late shift and was standing outside the glass front of the building, waiting for the bus that was already 10 minutes late. The rain was coming down hard enough to blur the streetlights. Cars kept sliding past, headlights cutting through the storm. That was when I saw her. She was standing by the curb in a black coat, soaked from the knees down, holding her phone in one hand, and staring at the screen like she was about to break it in half. She looked furious, but there was something else under that. Something tired. The kind of tired you don't get from lack of sleep. The kind you get from carrying too much for too long. A black sedan was parked in front of her. Hazards blinking. The driver was outside the car talking fast and clearly panicking. "I told you 20 minutes ago." She snapped at him. "If you can't do your job, I'll find someone who can." The driver went pale. I should have kept walking. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out my umbrella, and stepped toward her. "Here," I said. She looked at me like I had just appeared out of nowhere. "You need it more than I do," I said. Her gaze flicked from the umbrella to my face. "You're giving me your umbrella." "Yeah, I don't even know you." "I know," I said. "That's kind of the point." The driver blinked at me like I was insane. Maybe I was. The woman didn't take the umbrella right away. She just stood there, rain dripping from her hair, staring at me with those cold, unreadable eyes. Then she asked, "What's your name?" She repeated it once, quietly, "Carter." Something in her expression changed. Not much, just enough for me to notice. Then she took the umbrella from my hand. "I'll remember that," she said. I laughed a little, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. That sounds dramatic for a guy giving up his umbrella. Her mouth twitched almost like a smile, but not quite. "Good night, Carter." Before I could say anything else, she got into the sedan and the car pulled away. I stood there in the rain for a second, wet, confused, and a little amused by the whole thing. Then I forgot about her. For one day, the next morning, I walked into Blake Industries with a paper cup of gas station coffee and the same dead mood I had every other morning. The lobby was louder than usual. People were moving fast, too fast. Security was standing straighter than normal. Even the receptionist looked like she'd just swallowed a stone. "What's going on?" I asked Marcus, another intern who worked in legal. He glanced around and lowered his voice. "You don't know?" "No, what?" "Vivian Blake is here." I frowned. "Who?" Marcus stared at me. "Are you serious?" I shrugged. "Should I be?" He grabbed my sleeve and yanked me closer. "Vivian Blake, the CEO, the one from the news. The one who took over the whole West Coast division last year and doubled profits in 6 months. The one who doesn't do interviews, doesn't do parties, and scares grown men into early retirement." I looked at him unimpressed. "That's a lot of words for one person." "That's because she's not a person. She's a warning." I almost laughed. Then I heard it. The entire lobby went quiet. Every head turned toward the elevators. The doors opened and there she was, the woman from the rain. Except now she wasn't just a soaked stranger by the curb. She was Vivian Blake. Sharp black suit, straight posture, no wasted movement. She walked like the room belonged to her. And she was just being polite by letting everyone else stand in it. My stomach dropped. She looked up. Her eyes found mine instantly. Not a flicker of hesitation, not a search, like she had walked in already knowing exactly where I would be. I forgot how to breathe. Marcus leaned toward me and whispered, "Why is the CEO looking at you like that?" "I have no idea," I muttered. Vivian kept walking. And then right in the middle of the lobby, she stopped in front of me. The silence got heavier. She looked at my badge clipped to my shirt, then at my face. "There you are," she said. I glanced around. "Me?" A few people near us froze. She tilted her head slightly. "Only Carter?" I stared at her. She remembered. The receptionist, Marcus, and half the lobby looked ready to faint. "I think there's been a mistake," I said. Vivian's eyes never left mine. "No mistake." Then she turned toward the entire lobby and said in a calm voice that somehow made the room colder, "This is Carter." People shifted uncomfortably. "He's coming with me." The silence after that was so deep I could hear someone's pin drop. Marcus mouthed, "What the hell?" I mouthed back, "I have no idea." Vivian extended one hand toward the elevator. "Walk with me." She said I should have said no. I really should have. But every part of the room told me I was not in a place where no was an easy word. So I followed her. The elevator doors closed behind us for 3 whole seconds. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I said, "Okay, I'm going to assume you don't do this with every intern." "Correct. That makes me feel either very important or very doomed." She looked at me. "Are you always this nervous?" "No. Only when the CEO of the company I work for walks into the lobby, singles me out, and acts like she knows me." "I do know you." I blinked. "No, you know my name." "That's enough for now." "For now." She didn't answer. The elevator reached the top floor. Her office was larger than any apartment I had ever seen, but I barely noticed the furniture because she was standing at the window. One hand in her pocket, the other holding a slim black folder. She tossed it onto the desk. "Read it." I didn't move. Should I be worried? You should be curious. I opened the folder. My eyes dropped to the first page. And then I froze. It was a contract, not a job offer, not an NDA, a marriage agreement. I looked up slowly. "You've got to be kidding me." "I'm not." I flipped through the pages like maybe the words would turn into something reasonable if I looked at them long enough. They didn't. My name was printed on the first line. Carter. Her name was printed beside it. Vivian Blake. I laughed once. Short and disbelieving. "This is insane." She didn't deny it. "You wrote my name into a marriage contract." "I did." "Why?" She walked toward me. Calm, controlled, dangerous in the way only truly powerful people can be dangerous. "Because I found you." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you need." I closed the folder hard enough to make the pages slap together. "You can't just drag me into your office and hand me this like I'm signing for a package." "I'm not asking you to sign a package. You know what I mean?" Her expression didn't change. "I do." "Then explain it." She held my gaze. "I don't explain myself twice." That should have been the end of it. Instead, I heard myself ask, "Did you pull me up here just to mess with me?" "No." "Then why me?" For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Not softness. Not exactly, but something very close to memory. "You gave me your umbrella," she said. I stared at her. "That's it." "No, you can't be serious." Vivian crossed the room and stopped right in front of me close enough that I could smell rain and something expensive and clean. "You looked at me," she said. "And you didn't act impressed. You didn't try to get my number. You didn't ask who I was. You just gave me the umbrella." I frowned. "That's not a reason to marry someone." "It is for me." I stepped back. "Lady, I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm not your game piece." Her face hardened. "I don't play games." "Then what do you call this?" She picked up the contract again and tapped my name with one finger. "I call this truth." I looked at her like she was crazy. Maybe she was. Maybe I was. But then she said the next part in such a low, steady voice that I knew she wasn't joking. "I finally found you, my true love." The room seemed to stop. I actually took another step back. No, that's not how this works." "It is today. You don't even know me." "I know enough." I laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. "I work as an intern. Vivian, I don't even know if my paycheck is going to clear this week." "You're a CEO?" "Yes." "You could marry anyone." "I don't want anyone." That hit harder than I expected. I stared at her. She didn't blink. Then there was a knock at the door. A man in a gray suit entered without waiting for permission. He was middle-aged, sharp-eyed, and clearly uncomfortable. "Ms. Blake," he said carefully, glancing at me. "The board is already asking about the meeting." Vivian didn't look away from me. "Tell them to wait." "Vivian." She raised one hand. He stopped immediately. That alone told me everything I needed to know about the kind of woman standing in front of me. She turned back to me. You should sit down. I'd rather stand. As you wish. I crossed my arms. What meeting? She glanced toward the closed door, then back at me. The one where I tell them why your name matters. My throat tightened. You're really doing this? Yes. And if I refuse, then you'll still be in the room when they ask me to choose. Choose what? Her eyes were cold again. Between the company and the marriage. I frowned. Why would they care about me? She answered too quickly. Because they care about control. That was when I understood something important. This wasn't just about me. It was about her, about power, about pressure, about something ugly underneath the polished surface of this building. And somehow my name was in the middle of it. The door opened again, this time harder. 2 more executives stepped in, both looking tense. One of them, a tall man with silver hair and the kind of face that had been smiling at cameras for 30 years, stared at me like I was dirt on his shoe. What is this? He asked Vivian. Vivian held the contract up. This is my decision. The man laughed once. Your decision. I'm standing right here. I said. He barely looked at me. Then stand somewhere else. Vivian's voice dropped. Watch your tone. The man ignored her and spoke to the others. This is absurd. The board agreed that she would stabilize the image of this company through a proper alliance. I am the alliance, Vivian said. The room went still. The silver-haired man gave a thin smile. Not with him. Vivian took 1 step forward. I didn't ask for approval. You should have. She looked at him like he had just made a very stupid mistake. I don't take orders from men who think they can purchase my future. The other executive cleared his throat. Vivian, think about what you're doing. This affects everyone. She glanced at me, then back at them. Yes, she said. It does. Then she did something that made my chest go tight. She held the contract out to me right in front of everyone. Sign it, she said. The room exploded. What? You can't be serious, Vivian. I didn't take the paper. I looked at her and said, you don't get to drop a marriage contract on me 5 minutes after we meet and expect me to say yes. Her jaw tightened. I kept going. I don't care how rich you are. I don't care how powerful you are. You don't own me. For the first time since I'd met her, Vivian looked almost challenged. Then she smiled. Not a warm smile. A dangerous one. I never said I owned you. She stepped closer. I said you were mine. The executives around us went dead silent. My pulse jumped and I hated that it did. Vivian lowered her voice so only I could hear her. Listen carefully. I don't need you to believe me today. I just need you to stay in the room. I narrowed my eyes. Why? Because if you walk out now, she said, they win. Who? She looked past me, almost at something bigger than the room. Then she said, everyone who wants to bury the truth. Before I could ask what truth. The elevator doors opened again. This time, the man who stepped out wasn't an executive. He was younger, polished, and smiling. The kind of smile that made my skin crawl. He walked in like he owned the building. His eyes landed on Vivian first, then on me. Then the smile widened. Well, he said, voice smooth as oil. This is interesting. Vivian's face turned to stone. I felt it immediately. This was bad. Very bad. The man looked at me like I was a problem he intended to solve. Vivian, he said, not taking his eyes off me. I hope you're not making foolish choices because of one rainy night. The air changed. I looked between them. She didn't answer him right away. When she finally did, her voice was flat and deadly. Ethan Cole, she said, you don't get to speak to him. Ethan's smile sharpened and yet he said, here he is. He looked at me and added, the umbrella boy. The room went cold. Vivian's fingers tightened around the contract. And I realized too late that I wasn't just standing in a company office. I was standing in the middle of a war I didn't know existed. Vivian turned to me, her eyes locked on mine. I'm late, she said quietly. Don't trust anyone in this room. Then Ethan smiled again and said the one sentence that changed everything. You should ask her why she picked you. And just like that, I knew this story was only getting started. Ethan Cole's smile never reached his eyes. That was the first thing I noticed about him. The second thing was that Vivian Blake didn't flinch when he walked in. The third thing was that I suddenly understood this was not some rich people power game I could laugh off and walk away from. This was real. Ethan slipped one hand into his pocket and looked at the marriage contract on Vivian's desk like it offended him personally. You really are doing this in front of everyone? He asked. Vivian didn't even turn toward him. I'm doing it because everyone is here. His eyes moved to me. I looked back at him and said nothing. Vivian answered for me. His name is Carter. Ethan gave a small mocking nod. Yes. I heard the umbrella boy's name. The room tensed again. I could feel every executive in that office trying to decide whether they were witnessing a scandal or a murder. Vivian's voice stayed calm. If you came here to insult him, you wasted your time. Ethan chuckled. I came here because your board is concerned. My board can speak for itself. They already did. He took a step farther into the room and glanced around at the others. They're concerned that you've gotten emotional. That word made me look at Vivian. Emotional. Her face gave nothing away. Ethan kept going. You know what this looks like, Vivian? A brand new executive pulls an unknown intern into her office and starts talking about marriage. You understand how that sounds, right? It sounds like none of your business, she said. It becomes my business when the board has to clean up the mess. My jaw tightened. I'm right here. He smiled again. Exactly. I hated the way he said it, like I was something disposable. I was about to speak when Vivian cut in. Everyone out. No one moved. Her voice got colder. Get out. A few people immediately headed for the door. The others followed fast enough after that. The silver-haired executive from earlier hesitated, but one look from Vivian made him leave, too. Soon it was just the four of us in the room. Vivian, Ethan, me, and the silence between us. Ethan waited until the door shut before speaking again. I'll be direct, he said. Your father's old friends are worried. The shareholders are worried. Your family is worried. Vivian's eyes narrowed. You don't get to talk about my family. I'm not the one who brought up an engagement alternative 6 months ago. That landed. Vivian's expression barely changed, but I saw it. Just a flicker. 6 months ago. Alternative. I looked between them. What is he talking about? Ethan didn't answer me. He kept staring at Vivian. Tell him. Vivian said, no. He tilted his head. Tell him or I will. For the first time since I'd met her. Vivian looked genuinely dangerous. Ethan smiled, clearly enjoying that. Fine, I'll tell him. He turned to me. Your little romance story is cute. He said, but Vivian didn't pick you because of some magical rainy night, destiny. My chest tightened. He continued, she picked you because she was cornered. Vivian snapped. Enough. No, Ethan said. He deserves the truth. I looked at Vivian. What truth? Her jaw locked. Ethan folded his arms. 3 months ago, the Blake board pushed a binding arrangement. A merger. Family, money, control, the usual lovely little business. Vivian was expected to make a strategic marriage within the year. I stared at him. Vivian said, flat and sharp. That's not how I would describe it. Ethan ignored her. The candidate list was short. Very short. Mine was at the top. That made my stomach twist. I turned to Vivian. You were supposed to marry him. She didn't answer. Ethan did. Not just me. There were 2 others. My family, another firm, all approved by the board. Vivian's voice dropped. You didn't need to say that. Oh, I think I do. He looked at me with obvious satisfaction. Because now your new friend understands what this is. He understands he's not unique. He's just convenient. I felt heat rise in my face. Don't call me convenient. Ethan shrugged. Then don't act like it. I took a step forward before I could stop myself. If you've got something to say it like a man. Vivian's eyes flicked to me and for the first time I saw something close to approval. Ethan noticed too. That only made his smile worse. A man, he repeated. You want honesty? Umbrella boy. Fine. You're not even supposed to be in this room. I'm standing in it. Because she let you. I looked at Vivian. Is that true? She said, I let you in because I wanted you here. Why? She didn't answer. And that silence hit harder than anything Ethan could have said. I turned away from her and looked down at the contract on the desk again. My name, her name, marriage. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. This is insane. Ethan's voice softened. Almost fake, sympathetic. It is. Which is why you should leave now before you embarrass yourself any further. Vivian's tone cut through him like ice. He stays. Vivian. I said he stays. Ethan looked at her for a long second, then said, "You're making a mistake." "I've made a lot of mistakes." She replied, "You're just one of them." That should have felt satisfying. But I was too busy trying to hold on to the fact that my life had apparently taken a hard left turn into a billionaire soap opera. I pointed at the contract. "You want me to sign this?" Vivian said, "I want you to listen before you decide." Too late. I'm already deciding. Then decide after you hear the truth. Ethan laughed under his breath. You should have told him that before you dragged him into the office. Vivian finally turned to face him. "Why are you really here?" Ethan's smile thinned. "To remind you that the board meeting starts in 1 hour. And if you keep this up, they'll vote you out." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that you're unstable because I chose not to marry a man selected by committee. Because you're risking the company for a fantasy." I looked at Vivian. "A fantasy?" She didn't move. Ethan looked at me as if I were the fantasy. "You really think she just happened to meet you on a rainy street and decided you were special?" I didn't answer. He kept going anyway. "Vivian Blake doesn't do random. She doesn't do accidents. She does strategy." Vivian's voice was almost a whisper. "Soft, Ethan." He ignored her. "So ask yourself, why you? Why would a woman like her hand a marriage contract to a nobody intern?" That question sat between us like a lit match. I hated that I had asked myself the same thing. I looked at Vivian. "Yeah, why me?" She held my gaze for a long time. Then she said, "Because you didn't look at me like everyone else did." "That's not enough." "It is for me." "It shouldn't be." "Maybe not." She said, "But it is." I wanted that to mean something. I really did. But Ethan was still standing there calm and smug. And my gut told me he wasn't done. He wasn't. He took out his phone and held it up. "Since we're being honest, maybe this should be public." Vivian's eyes sharpened. "Put that away. You don't want him to see this." No, that was all I needed. I stepped forward. "Show me." Vivian's head snapped toward me. "Carter." Ethan grinned and tapped the screen. It was a photo, me outside the building, standing under the umbrella in the rain beside Vivian. Except the photo had been cropped in a way that made it look like I'd been waiting for her, like I'd known exactly who she was, like I'd staged it. I stared at the screen. Ethan watched my face carefully. "There, now you see the problem." My voice came out rough. "That's not what happened." "No one cares what happened." He said, "They care what it looks like." Vivian stepped between us. "Give me the phone." He didn't. "Instead," he said, "the board will see this within the hour unless you agree to end the little performance." I looked at Vivian. "He's blackmailing you." She didn't answer immediately. Ethan did. "I'm protecting the company from your impulsive behavior. By threatening to release a fake photo. By preventing a collapse." Vivian's face went blank, dangerous again. Then she said, "You forged this." He smiled without shame. "I improved it." That was the moment I stopped standing still. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You're pathetic." He raised his brows. "Careful. You're so desperate to control her that you'll fake evidence and act like you're the victim." "Carter." Vivian warned, but she didn't sound like she wanted me to stop. Ethan looked amused. "You're brave for a man who has no idea what he's walking into." "I know enough." I said. "Do you?" He took a step toward me. "Then tell me this. Did Vivian tell you why your name is in that contract? Did she tell you about the Blake family trust? Did she tell you why the board needs her married before the next vote?" I looked at Vivian. She was still, but something in her eyes had changed. "That told me enough." "No," I said quietly. "She didn't." Ethan spread his hands. "There it is." Vivian turned to him. "You talk too much." "I talk enough." "No," she said. "You hide too much." He smiled. "And yet, here we are." The room went quiet again. Then Vivian did something I wasn't expecting. She walked over to the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out another file. She slid it toward me. My name was printed on the front. I stared at it. "Open it," she said. I didn't move. She repeated. "Carter, open it." Inside were copies of documents, some old and some recent. A name on the first page caught my eye. Carter, the same name, but below it was a second line, a birth record. My blood ran cold. "This," I said slowly, "is me?" Vivian nodded once. "Why do you have this?" Ethan straightened. For the first time, he didn't look amused. Vivian said, "Because I've been trying to find you for years." I looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, "that the day you gave me your umbrella was not the first time you saved me." My mouth went dry. Ethan swore under his breath. "You told him." Vivian ignored him. "It means that everything you think you know about your life may not be true." I stared at the papers. A birth record, an old address, a file of names. My chest tightened so hard it almost hurt. "What is this?" I asked. Vivian's voice softened, just a little. "It's the truth." Ethan stepped in fast. "No, it's leverage." Vivian snapped her head toward him. "Sit down." He laughed bitterly. "You can't keep pretending this is about love." "I'm not pretending anything." "Then tell him the rest." She looked at me. Her face was unreadable, but her voice lowered. "Your mother worked for my father." I went still. "My mother?" Vivian nodded. "She was one of the people in the house the night my father died." The room tilted. I couldn't process it fast enough. My mother had worked for the Blake family. There had never been any mention of that. Not once. Not in the tiny apartment where I grew up. Not in the stories I was told. Not anywhere. I looked at Vivian like she was speaking a foreign language. "That's impossible." I said. "It's not." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Don't do this now." Vivian didn't look at him. "Your mother disappeared the next morning." I swallowed. "What are you talking about?" "She left with you." The words hit like a punch. I just stared at her. "What?" Vivian held my gaze. "The records show she took you and left before sunrise." "No." "Yes." "No." I repeated more forcefully this time. "That's not possible." "I'm sorry," she said. And for the first time, her voice sounded almost human. "But it is." I shook my head, refusing it. "My mother died when I was 9. Ethan's face tightened. Vivian didn't move. "Carter, no." I stepped back. "No, you don't get to say that. You don't get to hand me a file and rewrite my entire life like I'm one of your business decisions." "Listen to me." "Why?" My voice came out sharper than I expected. "So you can tell me my mother was some kind of secret employee. So you can tell me I'm part of your family's mess. So you can make me feel like a charity case with a signature line." Vivian's expression hardened again. "That's not what I'm doing." "Then what are you doing?" Her answer came instantly. "Protecting you." That made me laugh once. Bitterly. "By marrying me. By keeping you alive." The entire room froze. Even Ethan looked surprised. I stared at her. "What did you just say?" Vivian didn't blink. "The people who killed my father are still out there." The silence after that was enormous. Ethan's voice went low. "Vivian." She finally turned toward him. "You knew." He said nothing. My eyes moved between them. "He knew what?" Vivian pointed at the file. "The reason I found your name is because it's connected to the night my father died. The reason I pulled you out of that rain is because someone has been watching for you for a long time." I felt cold all over. "Watching me?" "Yes." Ethan stepped forward. "This has gone far enough." Vivian snapped. "Sit down, Ethan." He stopped. I looked at her. "Who's watching me?" She was quiet for one beat too long. Then she said, "The same people who want this contract destroyed." I stared at her, my pulse pounding. She continued. "They don't just want my company, they want the evidence buried." "Evidence of what?" Vivian looked at me and for the first time, she looked almost afraid. "Of what really happened the night your mother vanished." My hands tightened around the file. The room felt too small, too hot, too silent. And then Ethan said the worst thing he could have said. "You should ask her what she was doing in your neighborhood last week." My head snapped up. Vivian's eyes flashed. What? Ethan smiled slowly. He didn't know that part. I looked at Vivian, confused and suddenly furious. You were near my apartment. She didn't answer. Ethan leaned back against the desk like he had all the time in the world. She's been watching you, he said, for a while now. My throat tightened. Vivian. She said nothing. That silence was enough. I backed away from the desk. No, I said. No. That's not happening. Vivian took one step toward me. Wait. You watched me. I had to. You had to. My voice cracked with anger. You want to explain that? Ethan's smile widened a little, like he was enjoying the crack in the floor. Vivian ignored him and looked at me directly. I didn't know how else to make sure you were safe. I stared at her. Something inside me went cold and hard. Safe from who? Before she could answer, there was a loud knock at the office door. 3 sharp hits. Everyone froze. A security voice came through the other side. Ms. Blake, we have a problem. Vivian's expression changed instantly. Ethan went pale and I had the sinking feeling that whatever was waiting on the other side of that door was going to make my life even worse. Vivian looked at me once and said almost in a whisper, whatever happens next, don't trust the man standing closest to the door. Then the door handle started to turn and Ethan moved first. That told me everything I needed to know. Men like him only reacted fast when they already knew what was coming. I stepped back just as the office door swung open and 2 security guards came in. Both tense, both scanning the room like they'd walked into a disaster they didn't want to own. The first guard said, Ms. Blake, we found unauthorized access in the records floor. Vivian's face didn't change. From where? Your father's old archive. My stomach tightened. Ethan looked at Vivian and for half a second I saw it. Not fear exactly. More like irritation that the wrong bomb had gone off at the wrong time. Vivian's eyes sharpened. Who got in? The guard hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Ethan straightened his tie. Probably a maintenance issue. Vivian turned to him. You don't speak unless I ask. He gave her a thin smile. You're really leaning into this control thing, aren't you? The guard cleared his throat. We found a man in the archive corridor. I looked up. A man. Vivian's head snapped toward the guard. Who? He said he was looking for Carter. The entire room seemed to go still. I blinked. For me. The guard nodded. He's downstairs with legal. Ethan's expression changed just slightly. Vivian noticed it immediately. Who is he? She asked. The guard swallowed. He said his name was Grant Vale. Ethan cursed under his breath. That was all I needed to hear. Vivian's eyes moved slowly from Ethan to me. You know him? It wasn't a question. Ethan put on his best fake confusion. Why would I know a random man wandering into your records? Vivian ignored him. Carter. I felt the room close in. Grant Vale. The name meant nothing to me, but it felt like something old and buried had just clawed its way up from the dirt. I don't know, I said carefully. Not yet. Ethan's mouth twitched. That's a very strange answer. I looked at him. You don't get to act surprised when your entire face says guilty. Vivian's voice cut in. Enough. She looked at the guard. Bring him up. Ethan stepped forward. That's not a good idea. Vivian didn't even glance at him. I didn't ask. Vivian. She turned on him so sharply that even I felt it. If you say my name one more time without permission, Ethan, I'll make sure you leave this building through the basement garage. He stared at her. I stared at her too for the first time since this whole nightmare started. I saw Ethan hesitate. That told me she wasn't bluffing. The guard left. The room stayed frozen. Vivian folded her arms and looked at Ethan. You're going to explain why the name Grant Vale made you flinch. He gave a dry laugh. I didn't flinch. You did. I was surprised by what? He met her eyes. By how fast this whole situation is unraveling. She stared at him for a long beat. Then she said, You're lying. He smiled. About what? About everything. That landed like a slap. I looked between them. Can someone please tell me what's going on before I lose my mind? Vivian's gaze softened just a little when it came back to me. You're not losing your mind. That's not exactly comforting. It should be. Ethan snorted. You hear yourself? Vivian didn't take her eyes off me. Grant Vale used to work for my father. That got my attention fast. She continued, he was our head of compliance. After the accident, he disappeared. My pulse jumped. You think he's connected to the file? I think, she said slowly, that he may be the only living person who knows why your name is in it. Ethan laughed once too quickly. Or maybe he's just a desperate man trying to get leverage. Vivian turned to him. You'd know about that. He looked amused. You keep pointing at me like I'm the villain. You are. He shrugged. I've been called worse. I watched them, then said, if this Grant guy is downstairs, then bring him up and ask him. Vivian nodded once. Exactly. Ethan's jaw tightened. And that more than anything made me sure he did not want Grant in this room. The elevator chimed 20 seconds later. The guards came back first. Then a man in his late 50s stepped into the office with them. He was tall but worn down. The kind of man who had once stood straighter than this and now carried years in his shoulders. His suit was cheap. His hands were rough, but his eyes went straight to me. And when he saw my face, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Well, he said quietly. You look just like her. My mouth went dry. Vivian stepped forward. Mr. Vale. He looked at her and bowed his head slightly. Ms. Blake. What were you doing in my father's archive? He didn't answer right away. His eyes were still on me. Then he said, I was looking for the boy. Vivian's voice sharpened. What boy? He looked at me again. Him? My stomach dropped. I'm right here, I said. Grant nodded. Yes, you are. Ethan folded his arms. This is pathetic. Grant finally turned to him. For a second, the room changed. The old man's calm wasn't weak. It was the calm of someone who had already survived the parts people like Ethan were still trying to control. You shouldn't be here, Grant said. Ethan smiled coldly. That's interesting coming from someone trespassing. Grant didn't react. Not interesting. Accurate. Vivian stepped between them. Enough, Mr. Vale. Answer the question. He looked at her, then at the file on the desk. If you found that box, then you already know the truth. It started long before the fire. My heart kicked hard. What fire? Vivian's eyes moved to me. Your father never told you. I stared at her. I don't even know who my father is supposed to be in this story. That shut the room up for a second. Grant's face shifted. Something like regret crossing it. Ethan's expression tightened again. And that was all the confirmation I needed. He knew. Vivian said, Carter, sit down. I'm fine. Sit. I did not want to. But the room suddenly felt less like an office and more like a trap. So, I sat. Grant looked at me carefully. Then he said, your mother's name was Nora Carter. My chest went hard. I looked at him. How do you know that? Because I signed the documents that got her out. Vivian's eyes widened a fraction. You helped her leave. Grant nodded once. The night Blake Industries burned its old records wing. There were 3 people left in the building who knew too much. Your father, your mother, and me. Ethan moved like he wanted to speak, but Vivian stopped him with one look. Grant went on. Your mother wasn't just an employee. She was a witness to the theft of company shares, the laundering of evidence, and the order to erase a child from the records. The words hit like a fist. I stood up too fast. Erase me. Vivian's expression changed. Grant's voice got lower. That night, they didn't just want your mother gone. They wanted the child gone, too. I laughed once, but it sounded broken. No, that's not real. It is, Grant said. Ethan finally spoke. This is ridiculous. A man walks in from nowhere and you're just going to believe him. Vivian turned on him. You've been doing a terrible job making yourself seem innocent. He ignored her and looked at me. Carter, does any of this make sense? I hated that part of me wanted to say no. Vivian watched my face. And when she spoke, her voice was softer. That's why I needed the file opened. She said, I didn't want to tell you before I knew the truth. Then tell me now. She nodded once. Grant says your mother took you out of the building before sunrise. After that, there was no record of you for years. I stared at Grant. Where did she take me? He looked away. I don't know. That's not good enough. I know. Then what do you know? He pulled a folded envelope from inside his jacket. Vivian's guard shifted immediately. One of them reached for it, but Vivian lifted a hand. Give it to him, she said. Grant walked over and handed the envelope to me. My fingers shook when I opened it. Inside was a photograph, old, faded at the edges. A woman standing in front of a hospital holding a baby. The woman was my mother. The baby was me. And on the back in black ink were 4 words. If they find him, run. I went cold all over. I looked up at Grant. Where did this come from? He swallowed hard. From your mother. She gave it to me. Vivian stepped closer. And why did she trust you? Grant laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. Because I was the only one left who hadn't sold her out. Ethan's face had gone pale. Not pale enough to miss. I turned toward him. You knew about this. He gave a small shrug that didn't reach his eyes. I know a lot of things. That's not an answer. He smiled, but now it was thinner, meaner. No, it's a warning. Vivian said. Stop threatening him. I'm not threatening him. You are if you keep talking. He looked at her. You really want to do this here? I want the truth. Careful, Ethan said. Truth is expensive. Grant muttered. Not as expensive as silence. Ethan's eyes flashed. You should have stayed buried. Vivian turned sharply. What did you just say? He realized too late that he'd spoken out loud. The room froze. I looked from Ethan to Grant, then back to Vivian. You heard him? I said. Vivian's face hardened. Ethan. He exhaled through his nose. This is getting out of hand. Answer the question. He spread his hands. What question? Why did you say he should have stayed buried? Ethan looked at me like I was a stain on his shoe. Then he said, because men like him are always less useful when they remember who they are. I stepped forward. What the hell does that mean? Grant's face changed completely. And before anyone could stop him, he said, it means your name isn't the one you were born with. The office went silent. I stared at him. What? Grant looked at Vivian, then back at me. Carter is the name your mother gave you to keep you hidden. My throat tightened. Hidden from who? He inhaled slowly. From the people who murdered your father. That sentence hit harder than anything else. I felt Vivian go still beside me. My ears rang. My father, I repeated. You said my mother took me away. Then you said my father was murdered. Which one is it? Grant looked older in that moment, suddenly exhausted by the truth. Both, he said. Vivian's voice dropped. Who is he? Grant hesitated. Ethan answered instead. Someone dangerous, he said. Vivian turned to him with murder in her eyes. You knew. Ethan didn't deny it this time. I stared at him. You knew my father. He looked at me. I knew of him. Then say his name for the first time. Ethan's confidence cracked. Grant said it first. Your father's name was Daniel Vale. The room shifted. Vivian's eyes snapped to Grant. Vale. Grant nodded once. Grimly. My brother. I almost stumbled backward. No, I said no. That's not possible. Grant's face was full of something I couldn't read. Guilt, maybe. Or grief. Your mother and my brother were married. I turned to Vivian so fast I nearly lost my balance. You knew this. I knew pieces. She said pieces. I knew your name was connected. I didn't know how. Vivian, I'm telling you the truth now. Grant lowered his head. Your father uncovered the money trail. Before he could testify, the board ordered the records burned and the witnesses removed. I looked at Vivian. The board. She gave a slow, controlled nod. Ethan's voice was sharp. Enough. Grant ignored him. Your mother hid you because she knew you'd be next. My pulse was hammering so hard I could hear it. I looked at the photo again. My mother. Me. Run. I swallowed hard. Why did you wait until now? Grant gave a humorless laugh. Because I was scared. Vivian said, scared of Ethan. Grant looked at him, scared of the people behind him. Ethan's face hardened. Vivian noticed that too. She turned her body slightly toward me, like she just decided exactly where the line was and where everyone else could stand. Then she said, "Who else knows?" Grant answered, "More than you want." Ethan spoke quickly, too quickly. "This is turning into a fantasy. You can't build a business case on old rumors and a faded photo." Vivian looked at him. "Then why are you sweating?" He touched the side of his face, then realized he had. That was enough for me. I stepped toward him. "Tell me what you did." He laughed. "You don't have that kind of authority." Vivian's voice cut through the room like a knife. "He does if I say so." Ethan looked at her in disbelief. "You'd hand him power." "I'd hand him a sword if it meant cutting out the rot." His face finally changed. "You're making a huge mistake." "No," Vivian said. "You did that a long time ago." Grant suddenly stiffened. "Ms. Blake," he said quietly, "we need to leave." Vivian turned. "Why?" He looked at the door. So did I. And that's when I heard it. Not the elevator. Not footsteps. A soft click. The kind of lock makes when it's no longer under your control. Vivian's eyes narrowed. "Who locked the office?" No one answered. Ethan's face had gone completely blank. That was when I knew. He wasn't surprised. He was waiting. Vivian looked at him slowly. "What did you do?" Ethan smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from him, and it was ugly. "I told you." He said, this was going to unravel. Vivian took one step toward him. "Open the door." He shook his head. "Not until we finish this, Ethan." His gaze flicked to me. "You want to know why you were really found?" My skin went cold. He pointed at the file on the desk. "Because you're not just tied to the past," he said, "you're tied to the inheritance." Grant looked like he'd been struck. Vivian's expression sharpened. "What inheritance?" Ethan's smile widened. "The one Daniel Vale left behind." I turned to Grant. "What is he talking about?" Grant's voice was barely above a whisper. "Carter." I looked at him, then at Vivian, then back at Ethan, and for the first time since this whole mess began, I realized the biggest lie in the room wasn't the contract. It wasn't the file. It wasn't even my name. It was the reason Vivian had been searching for me in the first place. Ethan leaned back against the desk. Calm as ever now that he had the upper hand again. "You should ask her," he said. Vivian didn't move. I did. I turned to her and said, "Ask you what?" For a second, she looked like she might actually tell me. Then her eyes shifted just slightly to the locked door and I knew she wasn't thinking about the question anymore. She was thinking about who was on the other side. A man's voice came through the hallway. Clear, familiar in a way I didn't understand. "Ms. Blake," he called through the door. "If Carter is in there, open up now." Vivian went pale. Grant took one step back. Ethan closed his eyes for half a second like a man hearing a clock reach midnight. I stared at Vivian. "Who is that?" She didn't answer. The voice on the other side called again, more clearly this time. "Carter." It said, "My son." The room broke open inside me. My son. I looked at Vivian, at Grant, at Ethan, at the locked door, and all at once, I understood that whatever life I thought I had before this moment was already gone. Vivian's hand found mine. For the first time, her grip wasn't cold. It was tight, protective, almost afraid. She whispered, "Don't open that door." Then the lock clicked from the outside and the handle began to turn. The handle turned. My whole body locked up. Vivian's hand was still gripping mine, tight enough that I could feel the tension in her fingers. Grant had gone pale. Ethan had gone still in that sick, satisfied way of his, like this was exactly the moment he'd been waiting for. The door opened. A man in a dark coat stepped into the office with two security guards behind him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and unmistakably calm. Not calm like Grant. Not calm like Vivian. This was the calm of someone who had already decided the outcome and didn't need anyone else's permission to make it happen. His eyes landed on me and then everything in his face changed. Not surprise, not confusion. Recognition. Real painful recognition. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then the man said my name again. Softer this time. "Carter." My throat went dry. Vivian moved half a step in front of me without even thinking about it. "Who are you?" she asked. He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on me. My name, he said slowly, is Daniel Vale. Grant made a sound behind me, something between a curse and a prayer. Ethan's jaw tightened and I just stared. Daniel Vale. The name hit me like a locked door opening in the back of my head. I knew that name. Not from today, not from the files. From somewhere deeper, somewhere older. I looked at Grant, then at Vivian. You said Daniel Vale was dead. Grant swallowed. I said he was supposed to be. Daniel gave him a flat look. And yet here I am. You're telling me you're my father. He took one step into the room. Yes. The word was so simple it almost didn't fit the room. It should have been impossible. It should have sounded insane. Instead, it sounded like a truth that had been waiting too long to be spoken. I laughed once. No, I said, no, that's not possible. Daniel's face didn't move. I know it's a lot. A lot. My voice cracked. You show up in my life after 23 years. Call me your son and you think a lot covers it. Vivian touched my arm lightly. HLY. I shook her off, still staring at him. Where were you? Daniel's expression darkened. Trying to stay alive. I took a step toward him before I could stop myself. And my mother. His mouth tightened. That answer was all I needed. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like the floor moved. Vivian noticed. Daniel did too. He looked at me and for the first time something human flickered across his face. Not guilt exactly. Something closer to grief. Nora did what she had to do. He said quietly. I stared at him. You don't get to say her name like that. He nodded once, accepting the blow. You're right. The room went silent again. Ethan was the first one to speak. Well, he said almost amused. This just became expensive. Vivian turned on him with such force I thought he might actually step back. You knew? She said. Ethan lifted one eyebrow. I suspected you knew. He shrugged. I knew enough. Grant looked at him in disgust. You let this happen. Ethan smiled coldly. I let it reveal itself. Vivian's voice dropped to something lethal. You brought him here. Ethan spread his hands. I brought the truth to the room. Daniel didn't take his eyes off me. We don't have much time. That made me stare at him harder. What does that mean? It means they know I'm here. Who? Daniel's gaze slid briefly to Ethan, then back to me. The people who tried to erase you. The room froze. Even the guards looked uncertain now. Vivian stepped closer to Daniel, blocking his line to me. If you're really Daniel Vale, she said. Then you know exactly what's in those files. He nodded. I do. Then start talking. He looked at her now. Really looked at her. And something in his expression changed again. You're the Blake girl, he said. Vivian's face stayed still. I'm Vivian Blake. You have your mother's eyes. She didn't react, but I saw it. A tiny crack in her control. Daniel turned back to me. I knew your mother before the fire. I crossed my arms, trying to keep my balance. You keep saying the fire. What fire? Grant closed his eyes. Vivian answered instead. The archive fire. The night the record's wing burned. Daniel nodded. That fire was not an accident. Ethan let out a short breath. Here we go. Daniel ignored him. Someone was moving documents out of the old compliance vault. Nora found them. She realized what had been happening inside the company. The theft, the forged ownership chain, the offshore accounts, the fake board votes. My mouth went dry. Vivian's voice was very quiet. And the child removal order. Daniel looked at me. Yes. I stared at him. Child removal order. Grant's shoulders sagged. Oh God. Vivian's expression changed for the first time since Daniel entered. You told me the file was incomplete. It was, Grant said sounding sick, because I never had the courage to open the rest. Daniel took a breath. They didn't just want Nora silenced. They wanted the Vale heir disappeared. My skin went cold. Vale heir. He nodded once. You. The room tilted. I looked at Vivian. Then Grant. Then Ethan. You're saying there was some kind of inheritance and people wanted me gone because of it? Daniel said, yes. Ethan finally smiled. That's one way to describe it. Vivian turned to him. What did you know? He shrugged one shoulder. Enough to be useful. She stepped toward him. If you've been sitting on this, you're done. Ethan laughed. I'm done when the board says I'm done. Vivian gave him a long cold look. Then I'll make sure the board hears everything. He didn't seem worried. That was what scared me. Daniel noticed it, too. His eyes narrowed. You already filed something. Ethan didn't answer. Daniel's expression hardened. What did you do? Ethan smiled. Exactly what I was hired to do. I looked at Vivian. Hired by who? She didn't answer fast enough. That was answer enough. Grant suddenly spoke. Ethan works for your uncle. The room went dead quiet. I blinked. I have an uncle. Daniel closed his eyes for a brief second. Vivian's head snapped toward Grant. You never said that. Grant looked miserable. I didn't want to give the name power. Ethan's smile widened by half an inch. That's the problem with old families. He said, they think if they don't say the truth out loud, it can't hurt them. Daniel's jaw tightened. Marcus Vale. I looked at him. My uncle's name is Marcus. Daniel nodded. Vivian's face had gone unreadable again, which meant she was furious. You came here, she said to Ethan, knowing this was family business. He gave her a little bow of the head. I came here because family business is where the real money hides. I wanted to hit him. Instead, I asked the only thing that mattered. Why me? Daniel answered before anyone else could. Because you were supposed to inherit everything. Silence, then me. Everything. He nodded. Yes. Vivian's eyes sharpened. Daniel. He should know. Daniel said. If I'm finally standing in front of him, then he deserves the whole truth. Ethan folded his arms, clearly enjoying that things were moving exactly how he wanted. Daniel looked at me. 23 years ago, your grandfather made a final amendment to the Vale Trust. I stared at him. I have a grandfather, too. Had, Grant muttered. Daniel continued. The controlling shares of Vale Holdings were to pass to my firstborn son. My mind tried to reject the sentence and failed. I was too busy trying to process the fact that my life had apparently been a lie in layers. When Marcus found out Nora was pregnant, he panicked. Why? Because if you existed, the trust would leave his hands. Vivian's voice was flat. So he tried to erase the child. Daniel nodded once, and everyone around him helped. I looked at Grant. You helped? He looked ashamed. I helped Nora escape. That doesn't answer me. No, Grant said quietly. I also helped bury the records before I got out. That landed harder than I expected. Grant looked at me like he wanted me to hate him and feared that I didn't hate him enough. I was scared, he said. I knew too much. And by the time I understood what Marcus was willing to do, I was already in it. I didn't know what to say to that. Vivian did. You ran. Grant nodded. Yes. She looked disgusted. Pathetic. He took the insult without defense. Daniel looked at me again. Your mother took you away that night. She saved your life. My throat tightened. Where did she go? Daniel's face darkened. That's what I've been trying to find out. I stared at him. You've been looking for me for years. Then why didn't you come sooner? His voice turned rough. Because every time I got close, someone disappeared. No one spoke. The office felt smaller now, more dangerous. Vivian's hand brushed mine again. Not taking it, just touching like she was checking whether I was still here. Ethan noticed. Of course he did. He smiled. You see, he said, this is exactly why the board couldn't let this go public. A missing heir, a dead matriarch, an alive father, and an executive who thinks she can fix it with a marriage contract. I turned to him. Why did you bring this up now? He looked pleased that I asked. Because, he said, the vote is tonight. Vivian's head lifted. Ethan went on, and with Daniel alive, the trust clause activates. My chest tightened. What clause? He looked straight at me. The one that hands control of the company and the evidence vault to the rightful heir. Everyone in the room turned to me. Me? I took a step back. No, Daniel said. Yes. Vivian said. Absolutely not. Grant said nothing, which somehow scared me most of all. I looked between them. You're all insane. Ethan laughed. Maybe, but now the system says you're the one in charge. Vivian turned to Daniel. If this is true, why didn't you tell him before? Daniel's gaze shifted to her, and for the first time, he looked almost sympathetic. Because I didn't know if he was safe. Vivian's mouth tightened. That answer doesn't help your case. It's the truth. She held his gaze for a long second, then looked at me. Her voice softened. Listen to me. I did. You don't have to accept any of this tonight. Ethan snorted. The legal machinery already accepts it. Vivian ignored him. You don't have to let them decide who you are. That should have been comforting. Instead, it made my chest ache because for the first time in my life, someone was telling me I could choose and I had no idea what choice I was supposed to make. Daniel stepped forward. I'm not asking you to trust me yet. Good. I'm asking you to survive the next hour. I frowned. Why? Before he could answer, the office lights cut out. Everything went black. A second later, the emergency lights snapped on in red. The room glowed like a warning. Someone shouted in the hall. A guard outside the office yelled, "We've got movement on the east stairwell." Vivian moved instantly, grabbing my wrist. "Stay behind me." Ethan cursed. They found the backup vault. Grant's face went white. No. Daniel turned toward the door. Marcus. That name hit like a gunshot. Then the intercom crackled overhead. A voice came through the speakers. Slow and smooth. I'm Carter. I froze. Vivian tightened her grip on my wrist. The voice continued. If you want answers about your mother, come to the archive basement alone. Daniel went pale. Grant whispered, "He's here." Ethan smiled like a man who had finally reached the part of the story he'd paid for. And Vivian turned to me with something fierce and protective in her eyes. Don't go, she said. The voice on the intercom said, one more sentence. 1 hour or your father dies first. I stared at the red lights, at the locked office, at the faces around me. Then from somewhere deep in the hallway, I heard a single gunshot. The gunshot echoed through the hallway like a warning from the past. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then all hell broke loose. Security voices shouted outside the office door. Someone was running somewhere below us. Alarms started screaming in a sharp red pulse that lit the walls like blood. Vivian tightened her grip on my wrist. HLY, stay with me. I looked at her, then at Daniel, then at Grant. Ethan had already backed toward the side exit, but one of the guards blocked him immediately. That was when Daniel said, Marcus is making his move. Vivian's jaw clenched. He's here. Daniel nodded once. He never left the building. Grant's face had gone gray. He was waiting for this exact moment. Ethan gave a short, bitter laugh. Of course, he was. I turned to him. You're enjoying this way too much. He looked at me like I was slow. I'm enjoying survival. Vivian stepped toward the intercom panel. Marcus Vale, if you're listening, open the archive basement or I'll have every security feed in this building dumped to the press before midnight. Static answered. Then that same smooth voice from the speaker returned. You still think this is your building, Vivian? Her face went hard. I know exactly whose building it is. A pause. Then the voice said, come down to the basement. All of you. Bring the boy. Daniel moved instantly. No. I looked at him. That voice is Marcus. Yes. Then why are we going? Because if we don't, Daniel said, burn the rest of the truth with the building. That was all I needed. Vivian was already moving for the door. Then we go now. Ethan tried to smile. It looked strange. This is either the worst night of my life or the best one. No one asked you. Vivian said. We hit the hallway together. 2 guards were down near the stairwell, not badly hurt, but shaken. Another one was shouting into his radio that the archive floor had been breached. Smoke was seeping from somewhere lower in the tower. Thin and gray, carrying the faint smell of burning paper. My stomach twisted. The fire again. We took the private service stairs down to the archive level. Daniel led with one hand on the rail, moving faster than I thought someone his age could. Grant stayed close behind me, breathing hard. Ethan was in the middle with Vivian at my side, her shoulder brushing mine every few steps like she was making sure I didn't disappear. When we reached the archive corridor, the lights were dimmed to emergency red. At the far end, the old compliance vault stood open. In front of it was a man in a tailored coat, silver hair, and the kind of expression that came from a lifetime of winning without ever being touched. Marcus Vale. He looked exactly like the kind of man who could erase a person and still call himself respectable. He smiled when he saw me. "Well," he said, "so, the lost heir finally came home." My blood ran cold. Daniel stepped forward. "You should have stayed dead where you were hiding." Marcus's gaze didn't even move toward him. "You always were dramatic, brother." I stared at Daniel. Daniel didn't deny it. Vivian noticed my face and said quietly, "He's your uncle." I looked from Marcus to Daniel and felt the room tilt. Marcus spread his hands. "You all look exhausted. Tragic, really. I had hoped this could be handled with less noise." Ethan let out a dry laugh. "You locked the office, triggered the stairwell breach, and set off a fire alarm. Less noise." Marcus gave him a cool glance. "You were supposed to keep Vivian distracted, not inspire a family reunion." That made Ethan stop smiling. "Good." Vivian's voice went like ice. "So that's what you were." Ethan said nothing. Marcus turned his attention to me again. "Carter, or should I say, Daniel Vale's son." I hated how calmly he said it. "You knew about me," I said. "Of course I did." "How long?" He looked almost amused. "Long enough." Vivian stepped forward. Anger sharpened into something dangerous. "You ordered the child removal." Marcus gave a small shrug. "I authorized an administrative correction." I stared at him. "You tried to erase me." "I protected the company." "No," Daniel said, his voice low and shaking now. "You protected yourself." Marcus' smile thinned. "And you," he said to Daniel, "were never supposed to survive the fire." Daniel didn't flinch. "You mean the fire you started?" The vault went silent. Even Ethan looked surprised now. Marcus' eyes narrowed. "Careful." Daniel stepped closer. "Nora found the transfer records. She found the offshore accounts. She found the forged trust amendment. When she confronted you, you burned the archive and blamed the electrical grid." Vivian turned to Grant. "Tell me that isn't true." Grant closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he looked defeated. "It's true." Marcus gave him a look of contempt. "You were always weak, Grant." Grant's hands were shaking now, but he held his ground. "And you were always a thief." That hit Marcus harder than I expected. He recovered quickly, though. "You can all play heroes if it helps you sleep tonight. It doesn't change the fact that the board votes in 6 minutes." Vivian's eyes sharpened. "Not if I stop it." He laughed softly. "You can't stop what you don't control." Then he looked at me. "You, on the other hand, can save everyone a great deal of trouble." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You sign the waiver. You confirm you have no claim to the Vale Trust. You disappear again and your father lives." Daniel's head snapped up. "Don't you dare." Marcus cut him off. "Or we can continue this conversation while my men remove him from the basement and finish what should have been done years ago." My chest tightened. He was bluffing maybe, but I didn't trust the man enough to find out the hard way. Vivian moved before I could speak. She reached into the inside pocket of her coat and pulled out a small drive. "What is that?" Marcus asked. She held it up. "Every backup file from your private archive, financial transfers, security footage, voice logs, everything." For the first time, Marcus looked angry. Ethan muttered, "You sneaky genius." Vivian ignored him. "I already sent a copy to 3 outside counsel firms, 2 regulators, and a reporter who hates your name." Marcus' eyes flicked to the drive, then to me, then back to her. "You're bluffing." Vivian smiled without warmth. "Try me." That was the first time I saw it in his face. Real concern, not fear. Concern, which meant Vivian had guessed right. Daniel looked at her like he was seeing her differently, too. "You planned this." She didn't take her eyes off Marcus. "I learned from him." Marcus's expression went flat. "You're very proud of yourself." "No," she said, "I'm angry." Then she turned to me and in a voice so steady it made my throat tighten. "You do not sign anything tonight." I stared at her. The whole world seemed to narrow down to her face. Marcus watched us with a cold, almost curious interest. Then he said, "You care about him." Vivian didn't blink. "Yes." The word landed in the room like a strike of lightning. Even I felt it. Ethan exhaled under his breath. Probably because he finally understood he'd lost control of the room. Marcus' eyes narrowed. You'd burn your own company for him. Vivian stepped closer to me, close enough that I could feel the heat of her anger, her fear, and something much deeper underneath both of them. I'd burn your company for him, she said. My chest hurt. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then smiled again, but this time it was ugly. You made a mistake, Vivian. She tilted her head. Which one? Thinking this was romance. Daniel stepped in before Marcus could say more. It isn't romance. It's your loss. Marcus' gaze snapped to him. Daniel went on. You stole the company. You forged the trust. You tried to bury a child and now you're standing in front of him pretending you can still negotiate. Grant suddenly reached into his coat. Everyone tensed, but he didn't pull a weapon. He pulled out a second folder. He held it up with shaking hands and said, You're finished, Marcus. Marcus's face changed for the first time all night. He looked genuinely caught off guard. Grant opened the folder. Inside were original signed records. Real ones, old trust documents, transfer confirmations, the kind of paper trail Marcus had spent decades trying to destroy. I kept copies, Grant said, voice rough. I was afraid for years, but I kept them. Marcus stared at him like he wanted to kill him on the spot. Grant's shoulders rose and fell. Nora made me promise. If anything happened to her, I was supposed to keep the copies safe. At the mention of my mother, my throat tightened so hard I almost couldn't breathe. Daniel closed his eyes. Vivian looked at the documents, then at Marcus. So, this is it. Marcus's face hardened. You think paper changes blood? No. Vivian said, it changes power. She took one step toward the vault, then another. Security is already moving upstairs. The board has been notified. The press is waiting. And if you touch him, she said, looking directly at Marcus, I will make sure the first thing they hear is your voice admitting you ordered the cover-up. Marcus's eyes flashed. He knew it was over. He just didn't know how badly. Then for the first time, he looked at me with something almost like pity. You still don't understand, do you? I stared back at him. Understand what? He smiled faintly. That your mother didn't just save you. The room went silent. Vivian stiffened. Daniel's face went white. Marcus spoke slowly like he was enjoying every word. She took something with her that night. Something I've spent 23 years trying to recover. I frowned. What are you talking about? Marcus looked past me toward the dark shelving at the back of the archive. Your mother knew where the final ledger was hidden. My heart jumped. Vivian turned instantly. What ledger? Grant whispered. No. Daniel looked like the air had left his lungs. Marcus smiled. The one that proves who really owned everything before the fire. Vivian's voice was sharp. Where is it? Marcus' smile widened. Somewhere in this building. Then he looked at me and added, and your mother left you the key. I turned cold all over. What key? But before he could answer, a deafening crash shook the archive from above. Dust rained from the ceiling. The emergency lights flickered. And someone on the upper floor shouted, they're heading for the north wing. Marcus' head lifted. Vivian's eyes flashed. Daniel grabbed my shoulder. HLY, listen to me. I looked at him for the first time. Really looked at him. This broken hunted man who was somehow my father. He said, if your mother left you a key, then you need to find it before Marcus does. I swallowed hard. How? His gaze moved to my hand, to the old silver ring on my finger. The one I'd worn for years without thinking about it. The one my mother had left me. Daniel stared at it like he'd just seen a ghost. Then he whispered, that's not just a ring. Vivian saw my face and took my hand in both of hers. HLY. I could barely breathe. My mom gave me this when I was little. Marcus's eyes widened for the first time. No, he said quietly. Daniel's voice was almost shaking now. Open it. I stared at the ring. There was a tiny seam in the band, a hidden compartment. My mother had once told me never to lose it, never to show it, never to let anyone have it. My fingers trembled as I pressed the seam. It clicked open. Inside was a tiny folded strip of paper. Vivian leaned in. Grant looked like he might faint. Ethan had gone completely still. I unfolded the paper. There were only 3 words written on it in my mother's hand. Follow the rain. I stared at the note, then at Vivian, then at Daniel. And suddenly, I knew the answer wasn't in the vault. It was where this whole story had begun. In the rain. Vivian's voice was soft. Where did she take you? I looked up slowly. I don't know, I said. Then I remembered something. A smell, wet concrete, old metal, a narrow staircase, a red umbrella, and a door with no sign on it. I looked at Daniel. I think I remember. Marcus' face changed instantly. Stop him. The basement door behind us slammed shut. Guards rushed in from both sides. Vivian pulled me behind her. HOY, move. Daniel grabbed the folder from Grant, then shoved it into my hands. Take this. I stared at him. What about you? He gave me the smallest, saddest smile I'd ever seen. I'm done running. Then he turned toward Marcus. And for the first time in 23 years, father and brother stood face to face in the light of the archive fire they had both tried to bury. Vivian grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the side passage. The last thing I saw before the smoke and red light swallowed the vault was Marcus screaming for security. Daniel throwing a punch and Ethan standing still in the chaos like a man finally realizing he'd backed the wrong horse. Vivian pushed open the side stairwell door and looked at me hard. Where does the rain lead? I swallowed, heart pounding. To the old river district. Her eyes locked onto mine. Then that's where we're going. We ran down the stairs, through the smoke, into the night, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't running from the past. I was running toward it. By dawn, the ledger was in our hands. By noon, Marcus Vale was under federal investigation. By evening, Ethan Cole was gone, and by the time the rain started again, Vivian found me on the rooftop standing under the exact same kind of sky where all of this had started. She stopped beside me and looked out over the city. Are you still leaving? She asked softly. I thought about my mother, about Daniel, about the ring in my pocket, about the way Vivian had stood between me and everyone else when it mattered. Then I turned to her. No, I said. She studied my face. Why not? I let out a breath and smiled for the first time in days. Because I think I finally found where I belong. Her expression softened. Then she reached for my hand. And this time, she didn't hide it. I was hoping you'd say that, she whispered. And under the rain, with the truth finally out in the city at our feet, Vivian Blake kissed me like she had never doubted me once. Not as a contract, not as a strategy, as a promise. And this time, nobody could take it.